we both agreed to speak from here, not the sea. That's, the immediate naval friendship. And first of all, let me express my sincere appreciation for the RUSI and also Sasakawa Peace Foundation for giving me this opportunity. And last week, I submitted full 20 pages paper to the controller. And I thought that was okay. But the last Friday, I got information too long. So I completed the shorter version, 11 pages. And this morning, or this afternoon, my fellow interpreters told me, Admiral, these 11 pages are still too long. So I cut down about 40% of my shortened version. But I'll try to convey my thought best to you. So if there is anything you don't understand, it's probably my fault, but also due to the constraints of my papers. Thank you. And today, especially in this very beginning of this seminar, the Royal Highness, the Duke of York, and also the Prime Minister Abe, and two speakers, they expressed a lot about the close Navy-to-Navy relationship between Japan and the United Kingdom. So this is the area where I cut the most. But still, I think I need to touch something on a very close special relationship. And the first, I'd like to start our relationship with the Imperial Navy and the Royal Navy. I'm getting old, so please forgive my use of the glasses. Since its foundation in 1869, the Imperial Navy had received substantial influence and support from the Royal Navy for many years. Looking back on its development, it is true that Imperial Navy, from its birth to the end of 19th century, practically brought almost all elements of being a modern Navy from the Royal Navy. It is needless to say that most important characteristics of modern Navy is not the equipment, personnel, especially the quality of officers and sailors. The Imperial Navy accurately recognized this and made every possible effort to quickly improve this element. The Imperial Navy wisely merged the fundamental samurai Bushido ethos of Japan, which was almost equivalent with the chivalry of European community, with the good spiritual tradition of the Royal Navy. And at the same time, Anglo-Japanese alliance during the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 and 1905 really played an important role for Japanese victory. Since then, the 2 decades-long Anglo-Japanese alliance from 1902 to 1921 played the role of a centerpiece of regional security for Japan and the United States. But unfortunately, as a result of Washington Treaty of 1922, the 2 nations lost their bilateral alliance. Indeed, the abandonment of the Anglo-Japanese Treaty at that time was a critical turning point in history, which ultimately left modern Japan in hopeless isolation or international isolation. Then the development of bitter days in the second half of the 1930s led the tragic result when the Imperial Japan went into the war against Allied nations in December 1941. In spite of many courageous and brave battles fought by the Imperial Japanese Navy during World War II in the Pacific, it was decimated and totally disappeared from the history after 3 years and 8 months long war. In this way, despite its 75 years glorious history, the Imperial Navy faded away completely, with nothing left except good traditions and culture. These naval traditions were the only positive psychological legacies of the defeated Imperial Japanese Navy. For 7 years after the war, there was no maritime power except Japan Coast Guard, which was established in 1948, 3 years after the end of the war. However, the quick outbreak and development of the Cold War at that time spurred Japan to establish a maritime guard force in 1952. Then, the Maritime Guard Force was subsequently expanded into JMSDF 1954. The senior leaders of the early JMSDF naturally set up a basic policy of keeping the best possible operational and tactical continuity from Imperial Navy, as well as retaining the culture and traditions of Imperial Navy. In this manner, the newly born JMSDF made the Imperial Navy as a spiritual model for its re-establishment. The good naval traditions of the Imperial Navy received or even transplanted from the Royal Navy in late 19th century had become a spiritual pillar of JMSDF today. And of course, in the growing JMSDF, they were not to be denied, but rather were transferred with encouragement to younger generations of JMSDF today. Then I'd like to touch upon our basic maritime defense strategy today. For the first 30 years period after the war, or after the conclusion of the US-Japanese alliance, the Japan-USA alliance acted as a key security and stability mechanism for Japan and the Western Pacific region. At the same time, along with the NATO alliance, the Japan-USA alliance also played a core role in the Western Pacific theater to deter and suppress the ex-Soviet Union in the Far East. Then, during next 30 years, after the end of Cold War, the Japan-USA alliance continued to play a key security role in the Asia region, where various factors of instability still remain. In addition to this fundamental regional stabilizer role, the Japan-USA alliance has been re-evaluated as an important means to assure the security of the widely spread area of strategic importance, starting from Southeast Asia through Indian Ocean via the Middle East, and then to the east coast of Africa. Let me grab my water. Sailor, water is the next thing to my life. Then, new capabilities of JMSDF built after 1980s covered the full spectrum of functions such as operations, force building, logistics, training, and education, as well as research and development. As a result of these all-out measures to build JMSDF up, JMSDF became a real operational capable naval force, supporting a reasonable partnership with the US Navy in mid-1980s. So now, I just touched upon our basic maritime defense strategy that is based on the US-Japan alliance. Then, now, there are one new factor that we need to take into account. That is the coalition. So let me speak something from Japanese view on the coalition. An alliance has long been a mechanism to bring several nations together to establish mutual goals common to participating parties. An alliance in general is tailored for a specific purpose. So it is firm and good enough to establish fixed and heavy objectives, but less flexible to react to unpredictable and rapidly changing situations, which fall outside of its original objective. Moreover, the reality of today's world has so changed that unexpected incidents or crises are observed very often in international community. In order to quickly respond to the above-mentioned dynamically changing situations, by bringing all possible nations together, an alliance sometimes exposes its limitations, and other forms of cooperation, typically represented by a coalition, are regarded to have some advantages over alliance, not fully, but just to make up for the limitation of the alliance. A coalition is a relatively new concept which will test the limits of many existing alliances in the complicated and difficult international situation of today. An advantage of a coalition over an alliance is that, depending on each case of international incident, one nation is able to count its national interest first, and next decide about its participation in international effort to settle the incident by fully reflecting on its internal circumstances. A coalition provides a good amount of political flexibility for participating nations. For a free and independent nation, this flexibility may not make a big difference. However, if one nation is a member of alliance with other nations, this flexibility really eases the nation in its difficult decision-making process from the strict responsibilities imposed by its alliance. And Japan, for the first time after the end of the Second World War, participated in support operation of the Operation Enduring Freedom from December 2001 to the January 2010. This was Japanese first experience to participate in the OEF, but we learned a lot of lessons. Then, let me think about the possible area of future cooperation between Japan and UK. UK is not Japanese allied nation, but there should be a lot for us to do, especially at maritime theater. And in order for us to develop an idea for future cooperation between Japan and UK, it is worth considering the situation in today's widely ranging hotspots, spreading from Southeast Asia, including the South China Sea, via the Indian Ocean, and to the waters of Eastern Africa. The reason why this area is selected as a model is that it is not only of great current military and geopolitical interest, but also because the area offers a future potential for us, for our two nations to cooperate. There are some specific characteristics common to Japan and UK. The vast maritime area, occupying 1/3 of the Earth's surface in terms of longitude, that is 30 degrees east to 150 degrees east, has provided a certain physical and diplomatic distance between our two countries. This not too close, but not too far nature provides a common advantage and disadvantages for us. That means we have common in these areas. And this maritime area is the one where the significant interests of our two nations lie. In other words, they are essential for seafaring trade and transportation of raw materials. For Japan, seafaring trade with Asia and European countries must pass through this area. Similarly, for the UK, most of its at-sea trade routes with the ASEAN nations also run through this area. So for our two nations, the oceans and seas in this longitudinal arc possesses a vital importance from various aspects if any form of security instability emerges. Next, the ocean have a strategic importance for not only the security and prosperity of our various regions and countries, but also for global strategy as a whole. It is easy to point out several reasons for this. First, this area contains oil-rich Middle East nations and their sea routes. Second, there are two big emerging nations, that is to say China and India, which international community must count on. Third, Both political and economic presence of global regional nations, typically represented by ASEAN, have become more and more influential. At the same time, there remain several elements of instability in some specific nations as well as regions. Based on these reasons, our two maritime nations, which are responsible for regional and global stability, are obliged to have serious interest and concern for worldwide security. Then, taking all of these factors into consideration, the future course of action for Japan and UK should be carefully sorted out. In most of the possible future security incidents occurring at and around sea mentioned above, it is quite certain that both Japan and the UK would participate in international efforts to control the situation. In this process, each of our two nations may deploy its naval forces to the affected area based on its national policy, domestic situations, and international commitment and naval capability at that time. Then, our on-scene deployed forces would start cooperation with each other and also with the US Navy, which is a common alliance partner. There's one example. It is true that there have been limited opportunities for two navies to work together in the same waters in Gulf of Aden. But both navies appreciate the various benefits and operational experiences gained through anti-piracy operations off the coast of Somalia. One noteworthy episode is that the P-3C patrol aircraft, or JMSDF, deployed to Djibouti provide daily ocean surveillance intelligence to the participating navies, including the Royal Navy. Like this, even despite an absence of a written bilateral agreement, a cooperative posture between JMSDF and Royal Navy units on the scene at any crisis would naturally be formed in future international operations. When we estimate our future, we should forecast our future by calculation, analysis, and a sound through thought process based on accumulated facts and intelligence. Under today's security environment, where full-scale war between major powers has become less possible, it is clear that future crises, which we'll certainly face and engage in, would be non-conventional or asymmetric security incidents, which have become prominent after the end of the Cold War. Especially in various crises after the Kuwait invasion by Iraqi forces in 1990. Many nations automatically selected participation in military coalition operations as their form of support for international crisis management and resolution. This general flow of the tide toward coalitions has been a kind of emerging wisdom of life in the international community that is naturally created to meet current situations in the new and the complex world of international affairs. Within these developments, one thing we should notice is the fact that all the efforts to form coalitions and conduct operations under this framework since 1990 were arranged under the initiative and lead of the United States of America. The USA, as a single superpower and the greatest naval power in recent history, has various national interests in any incident in the world, and also has heavy responsibility to maintain the world's security and stability. If so, today's coalition under USA's lead has been and will be designated as Coalition Built on USA Initiative. This is my term, but Coalition Built on USA Initiative. For non-partner nations of alliance with USA, their deployed forces will receive basically the same benefits from the coalition mechanism built around the US forces if they join its coalition structure. But if we think about the future situation may not be like this. I believe, however, that we must think about a new form of coalition in the future and make ourselves ready for the upcoming complex future situations for which we will have little experience. Most likely, the possible case to meet this criterion would be the one which the US cannot or will not take the lead in forming a coalition framework due to mismatches of national interest or other vital reasons of the United States. Here, a little deeper examinations of the possible cases or incident must be made. The first case is an international security crisis or incident in which the United States does not see any or perhaps only a little of its national interest being involved. In this case, the USA could be very reluctant to take any action with its Navy. Second is a situation where another major power has a stronger national interest than that of the United States. In this case, some other nations could be forestall the USA and then take the lead to form its own type of international cooperative mechanism. And the United States could not find an active incentive to interrupt the other's initiative. It is natural and understandable that the USA may become unwilling to take lead of new coalition. Generally speaking, those could be the cases where another major power, which does not share common interest with that of the USA, has strong intentions to engage in that incident. If these are the cases, there are two potential nations which could fill the gap of the absence of USA and might take lead. That is to say, one is reviving Russia, and the other is an emerging China. Should a coalition or other form of international cooperative body be formed without USA, it could be acceptable for international community as long as its objective remains fair and reasonable. However, in some vital cases, it would not be desirable for Japan, UK, and USA. In addition, from a practical naval operation point of view, such a coalition under China or Soviet lead would not be desirable because of the lack of the well-established common standard operation procedures, which most participating navies appreciated under the strong leadership of the United States today. Such a coalition could generate tactical confusion and some hazardous situations affecting operational safety. If we wisely take these problems into consideration, the best and most practical resolution to this fragile situation is to form a coalition framework under the Royal Navy's lead. The Royal Navy has been regarded and respected as the founder of the modern Navy. Even the Russian Navy or Chinese PLA Navy cannot deny this historic fact. I don't know if Brits would agree or not, my opinion, but let me propose. And the next thing is, and my second recommendation, but the last recommendation, also promoting European nations' active support for the freedom of navigation in Asia. Traditionally and historically, successive US governments have taken clear position on territorial disputes in the South China Sea. In other words, USA does not support any specific nation in terms of the territorial ownership, but rather it encourages nations involved in sovereignty dispute to take peaceful means to solve the problem. The US government seems to maintain this policy strictly in the future too. However, facing the quick buildup in recent years of China's naval capability and its aggressive expansion of maritime activities, and its tough position on territorial and EEZ-related issues in South China Sea, the United States started taking new positions on the South China Sea problems in 2010. The US government does not single out China in its new policy, does not single out China in its new policy. However, it started to reaffirm freedom of navigation as one of the key national interests of the United States. After first being mentioned by then US State Secretary Ms. Hillary Rodham Clinton in July 2010 at ASEAN Regional Forum meeting in Hanoi, Vietnam, the US government has repeatedly used this expression at various opportunities since then. For China, this new USA's policy is a strong warning to Chinese aggressive and tough position on South China Sea issues. This is one of the reasons why China tried to hush up the new binding declaration at ASEAN's foreign ministers meeting in Phnom Penh, Cambodia in July 2012, and Chinese reluctant position on multinational dialogue to resolve South China Sea disputed issues. Having said this, the current situation seems that USA, supported by Japan and several other ASEAN nations, has been making a single-handed policy offensive against China, and almost no support has been received from European nations, especially those in NATO. I strongly believe that since this issue is a matter of fundamental interpretation of traditional maritime international law and UNCLOS, Japan and UK should cooperate closely to promote European nations' support for the freedom of navigation issue. If we fail to influence China on this subject, the future of worldwide maritime and seafaring activities will be seriously jeopardized. And to conclude, I'd like to speak something about our past cooperation. In 1991, when Japan deployed its minesweeping force to Kuwaiti waters, immediately after the end of the first Iraqi invasion, the Royal Navy's Marine Countermeasures team provided unforgettable support for our Marine Countermeasure Force. At that time, JMSDF MCM ships badly needed to receive a must-have type magnetic field calibration prior to conducting actual clearance operations in a harmful minefield of Kuwait. The only naval unit capable to conducting this calibration was the small Royal Navy's minesweeping support range at Dubai. Despite the absence of diplomatic arrangement to conduct mutual military support, the Royal Navy unit there kindly granted short notice request of JMSDF and provided perfect support for our ships. Without this calibration support, our MCM operations off the coast of Kuwait could have ended in failure. This episode seemed small and less visible than other large-scale operations. However, all JMSDF shipmates, including me, really appreciate it and applauds the true sense of solidarity and true seamanship shown by sailors of the Royal Navy. And beside at-sea operations and exercises, Navy-to-Navy strategic talks between Ichigaya and Whitehall provide another good opportunity to exchange various strategic and operational views and opinions between two geographically separated navies. These exchanges really made up enough for the handicap of geographic separation. And when I was there in 2002, his nickname was Clever Trevor, Rear Admiral Trevor Saw. He was my counterpart. And he ended with the Commander-in-Chief of the Fleet, like me. Still, we exchange. This is the nature of our exchanges. What I have just mentioned here are my thoughts based on my experience and situational analysis from 30 years long experience in the JMSDF. These thoughts were also products of my involvement in both JMSDF US Navy and JMSDF Royal Navy exchanges as an action officer and a senior staff in Tokyo from 1987 until my retirement in 2008. I'm more than happy if my presentation here has been somewhat helpful and can provide a point of reference for all sailors of JMSDF and the Royal Navy, and together with you. Thank you very much.